Hey, what is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I am here with somebody, kind of a funny story actually. Him and I were basically neighbors for our entire lives. And then I was scrolling through Facebook about 2 months ago, and I saw an article about how your company had just raised over $1 million. And I was like, what is this kid up to? And I know you guys have enjoyed these videos in the past where I interview like real life entrepreneurs. And so I invited him. He actually drove all the way up from New York City, which is about a 3-hour drive for this video. So we certainly do appreciate that. And I just kind of want to get his backstory here about what his company is. And I feel like there's so many questions people have for young entrepreneurs. Like, did you go to college? Do you recommend college? And all kinds of that different stuff. But first of all, thanks for coming up.
Hey,
I
thanks for having
appreciate that,
me, buddy.
man.
Good to see you.
So why don't we start off with what exactly is your company, PowerSpike, that you've created here? Or are you the founder?
I am one of three founders.
Okay, one of three founders. Okay.
Yeah, so our company PowerSpike was started when we had this really interesting experience, probably about 5 years ago, where we were creating esports tournaments on Twitch. And if you're not familiar with esports, it's essentially competitive video gaming, where people are running these tournaments and players are competing in them for prizes. So I was part of this esports organization that was creating these events on Twitch, and we ran into this really interesting problem where we were getting tens of thousands of viewers on every single one of our events, and they were super successful, but we had really limited ways to monetize it and actually build a sustainable source of income for the business. And we were spending about like $1,000 to $3,000 a week just trying to cover these prize pools, which was crazy. So essentially what we ended up doing was we looked at a few different ways to monetize the business. One of them being pre-roll ads that we'd put on the Twitch stream. And at the time, most people were using an ad blocker. So that was...
Yeah, that didn't work for you.
Yeah, bit of a challenge. And then on top of that, there were other methods that we looked at, which were donations from our community. But the challenge with that is that's a sort of an unreliable source of revenue because one month you'll get this much and then another month you'll get that much. So it was really hard to predict how we could actually cover those cash flows. And then the other option that we looked at were sponsorships and advertisements that we could put on the channel, where we could use the influence and the viewership that we built up over time to endorse different products. So we had this really interesting experience where we reached out to about 100 different brands and advertisers looking for a sponsorship opportunity. And I think we got 2 responses back, and both of them were rejection letters.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I find that too, where like you'll send 100 emails, and like if you get, I find like 5% response rate is even good. People like never respond to that stuff. Yeah.
It's crazy. And it was a super good lesson in cold emailing, right? But for us as creators, it was sort of discouraging because we were like, wow, we've got all this viewership, but it's so challenging to get an actual sponsorship. So what ended up happening, long story short, we took that lesson on the chin and we ended up starting PowerSpike because we wanted to create a better way for creators like ourselves to actually go out and find sponsorship opportunities on platforms like Twitch. So we ended up creating that platform about almost 5 years ago now at this point. And we've just simply grown it over time to work with a whole roster of different clients and brands and advertisers. And we work with some of the top creators on Twitch today as well.
Wow. So basically you having gone through that experience, the pain point of like being a Twitch streamer with a bunch of eyeballs on you and no way to really make money with it in a reliable way. And so you're basically, so to explain what it is that PowerSpike does, you basically are the bridge between the influencers and the advertisers, or the big brands in that space?
Yeah, exactly. So we help connect influencers who want to get a sponsorship on their channel with a brand or advertiser that wants to provide that.
Okay.
And there's a lot of interesting challenges that go along with that, right? So if you're a creator, you want to focus on creating content. You want to focus on running a YouTube channel or running a Twitch stream and doing what you're great at, which is working with your community and creating interesting content. If you're a brand or advertiser, you come from more of a business perspective and you're really looking for viewership or clicks or whatever it may be that your goal is, or even sales for your business. So it's really interesting because we tried a few different approaches to the marketplace at first, where we would just kind of connect everybody together. And we found that it was a really tough connection to make because a lot of times creators have it's challenging when it comes to working with brands because the incentives and what each party is looking for aren't always necessarily aligned. So putting them together, a lot of times creators might not necessarily understand all of the kind of jargon that goes along with like a specific brand or advertiser and what they're looking for, and how to actually sell into these businesses. because it's just not what any creator wants to really do. It's not necessarily what they're good at. So really what we looked at for our approach to the marketplace and how we've essentially structured this is, instead of making a brand or advertiser go work directly with all the creators and have to manage a program on their own, we've essentially created a platform where any brand or advertiser can come to us and essentially start working with creators just like they would buy an ad on Facebook or Google.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's really what, and it's funny because I was talking to AJ about this. I've experienced the same exact struggle with trying to buy influencer promotions on Instagram, which is where basically I would be looking to get a better deal for my money. Totally. Because, you know, as far as the marketplaces like Facebook and YouTube and doing Google ads, like you're paying a lot for those ads now because that's what everybody's doing. So I personally was like, okay, I want to try to go after some influencer promotions to try to get a better deal, better, you know, cost per click or whatever that metric is. But like after doing it, and I only did $2,000 of spend, I spent hours like DMing Instagram influencers, hey, do you do paid promos? Yep. Oh, okay. How do I pay you? Okay, I just paid you. When are you going to run them? Yep. And there's just so many like annoying, it's just not a good like process for doing that.
Yeah, totally. It's really complicated, right? If you're a brand or advertiser who wants to work with a creator on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Twitch or whatever the channel may be, you have to remember at the end of the day that it's not like buying an ad on Facebook, right? Like these are people at the end of the day that you're dealing with, and everybody has their own individual ways that they like to be communicated with. Everybody has their own channel that they like to work through. So at the end of the day, if you're a brand or advertiser, there's so many different steps that you're going to have to go through to actually run an influencer campaign. I mean, just think about it. You have to, first off, you got to identify who you want to work with. So you have to search through hundreds of YouTube channels or Instagram posts to figure out which type of creators are actually going to be relevant for your industry. If you're a financial services company, you want to find people who speak specifically to people who are interested in financial services. So you have to identify that first. Then once you've done that, you need to figure out a way to get in contact with the influencer themselves. So looking through their Instagram, you know, maybe reaching out to them and trying to find their contact email or whatever it may be. Then once you've got their email, you got to reach out and do all the back and forth, and you have to send them a contract, and then you have to negotiate that contract. And then once that contract has been signed, then you actually have to make sure that whoever you hired actually goes and creates the content, because sometimes people may ghost the campaign, or maybe they don't necessarily want to be a part of it anymore. Or life just happens, right?
And that's something I ran into too, where I was paying for promotions, and then I was like, okay, do I sit here and like baby them and then like message them, hey, have you run the promotion? Or do I just trust that they're going to run it? So that's really huge too. So here you are, you said 5 years into doing this business.
Yes.
I know you can't talk about specific numbers in terms of revenue and stuff like that, but as far as raising money, can you speak to that a little bit as far as like what you were able to raise?
Yeah, totally. So we've done 2 rounds of funding at this point. We've done a pre-seed round, and then we just recently closed a seed round. We've done in total about close $1.9 to $2 million in outside capital that we've been able to raise for the company, which has been it's been super exciting. It's definitely a very different path than what more traditional businesses would go down, as when you raise that kind of capital, there's a lot of expectations that go along with it. But it's really been exciting to have the opportunity to do that, and we're like super thankful. That
that's why I reached out to you, because that's very impressive for like at 23 years old.
23.
And then the other 2 founders, are they also similar age, or are
they 22, 23.
So like a group of young guys all, or
yep, guys.
Okay, I didn't want to assume, but I figured video games, that's probably a safe bet. It's 3 dudes. I mean, that's pretty cool at in your 20s, early 20s to raise almost $2 million, man. That's that's not nothing to shake a stick at, you know, for sure.
We never expected that we would be able to do it. I mean, like when we first started this, it was really, for us at least, it was a passion project. And it was something that we just wanted to help creators like ourselves to be successful on these platforms like Twitch. And the idea that it's like morphed into this company and like this venture-backed business now is just, it's mind-blowing.
Right, for sure. And I think it's really important too for like people who are a little bit younger watching this. I mean, so you started this when you're 18 or so? Somewhere around there?
roughly 18, 19, yeah.
So I mean, this is actually, with hard work, this type of stuff is actually possible, where you have an idea and then it comes to fruition, and then you eventually raise money with that idea. And I think a lot of people think that, I know I certainly did when I was going through high school. I thought like the only path was like, okay, you graduate high school, you go to college, then you get a 9-to-5 job, and then you work that for 45 years and eventually retire. And so there's different paths out there, and especially today, it's like easier than ever to like get into like, you know, entrepreneurship. So I kind of want to circle back and talk more about maybe your earlier years. So like, did you actually go to college or did you not? Because I know I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. Some of them like don't agree with college or they dropped out. So I'm just curious like what your take is on that.
Yeah, so I went to Syracuse University, go Orange. You know, my experience with college was a really unique one because what I found with college was that I got a tremendous amount of value out of it in the first 2 years that I was there. And the key thing about it is that I think that what college gave me, which I didn't have anywhere else, was time. And when you're living with your parents or when you're growing up, you're kind of under their rules and their household, and you know, you have all these different things that are pulling at you. And for the first time ever when I got to college, the biggest asset that we had was time. Like there was just so much time between like classes that you could do. I was going to business school, so I mean, like, you know, there's not
It wasn't super time constrained.
No,
okay.
no. I mean, it's not crazy, right? So being at college, I just had so much free time, and I was kind of sitting there, and there was this one speaker that came into class and gave this talk about how college is essentially what you make out of it. And it can be, you can party the entire time while you're there. You can start a business, you can hang out with your friends. I mean, there's so many different things, and the college experience is really what you make out of it at the end of the day. And for me, what really inspired me was it gave me the ability to be creative, and it gave me and my founders the ability to go out and just work on something that we wanted to do. And at the time when we first started the business, we really viewed it as more of like I said, a passion project, right? We didn't think of this as like, oh, this is going to be like some big venture backable business.
Right, yeah.
We really just looked at it as this is something that's fun, and this is something that we just want to continue to create, and let's see how far we can go with it.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's what I found too. Most people who start really successful companies are not starting it from the standpoint of like, oh, I'm trying to make money.
You
like,
won't make it.
Everybody has that desire of like, they'd love to make money or that passive income and stuff like that. And even myself included, like, not that I don't have a venture-backed business, but I mean, even this YouTube channel, when I started it, I was actually telling AJ about it off camera because I haven't seen him in 10 years. So he was like, what are you up to? And I told him about, I was like, I don't know, I just started this as a hobby on the side. I was passionate about investing, and I just started putting up videos to be helpful. So I think that's a really important lesson here that we just touched on is like, you don't want to go into things from this viewpoint of like, I'm trying to make money, because that's just not the right attitude. And like, I don't know, how long did it take you before you even made any money with this business?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Okay.
And the first check that we got in the business was for $20.
For $20.
And you have no idea how excited I was about that. Like we had this on-campus incubator where we could go and get feedback and advice. And that was one of the brilliant things about CUSE was that they had all these on-campus resources to support entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So I remember I had this mentor in the Blackstone Launchpad, Linda, and she was always just so enthusiastic about the company and what we were building. And I remember after 3 years of just blood, sweat, and tears, and like pushing away and just trying to create this platform, we finally got one brand to come on and actually spend $20.
$20
right?
with you guys. That's unbelievable. Yeah.
And I remember I saw the check hit our accounts, and I got up and I just started like dancing. I was like screaming, I was like high-fiving everybody in the hallway, like, and I remember just like dancing down to that incubator and like doing a little happy dance with my mentor down there. And looking back at me, it was $20.
But
right?
that's the first time that you realize, oh my gosh, this works. This is like proof of concept.
It's like somebody else is willing to pay for something that you've created, and it's the best feeling in the world, even if it's just $20, right? Like the point being is that somebody else found value in something that you created, and it is the most exciting and exhilarating moment. And I think the key thing that people get lost in when they start to create a business. And what a lot of people don't realize is that for most businesses, it takes roughly 2 to 3 years to become profitable, no matter what you're doing. It takes time because you have to figure out the problem that you're solving. You have to create the right solution for it. Specifically in a venture-backed business, if you're starting like an accounting firm, there's a way to do that, right?
Sure.
And you can start making money from day one. But the key thing is that when you're starting a venture-backed business, it takes time to actually realize value from that. And it's still like, even if you look at these companies like Amazon or Uber, a lot of them are even 10, 15, 20 years later, they're still not profitable.
Yeah, exactly.
And part of that is based on their strategy that they want to prioritize growth over profits. But really the key thing at the end of the day is that anything really significant that you want to create, it's going to take you time to realize value from it. And if you're going into it from the perspective of, I'm building this company to make money versus I'm building this company and this business because it's something that I really care about and it's something that I'm passionate about. I mean, that's what's going to get you up at 6 o'clock in the morning to take a call with a customer. That passion and that excitement that you have for the business, it's what's going to get you through the really, really, I mean, the worst times. It's hard, man. And you really have to have that passion for whatever it is that you're working on. Otherwise, why do it?
All right, so one thing I just thought of while you were talking about that, can you tell me like what was the darkest day of the last 5 years of this, where you were just like one of those moments where you're maybe questioning what the hell am I doing, or whatever the situation may be, or something that comes to mind?
Oh man, there's a lot of, that's a great question. I'd have to say that I think one of the biggest mistakes that probably like the darkest day and one of the biggest mistakes was not prioritizing culture from the start. And I think that this is something that a lot of first-time founders make a mistake on, is not being able to, not putting your company's culture first and not being mission-led and values-driven. And for me, when I first started this business, I went to business school, and they teach you about like company values and company mission and vision in business school, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And you kind of look at that when you're in business school, and you're like, oh, that's just
it seems
baloney,
hokey.
right?
It seems like, this doesn't matter. Like my company vision,
Yeah. I mean, who cares about that, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, it's I would argue, one of the single most important things that any business needs.
Yeah.
And there's so many mission and vision statements out there that are horrible, and I think that that's why it gets a bad rep for what it's worth. But for us, and the way that we look at it, it's at the end of the day, it's what is going to get people excited about what you're working on, like your mission and what you're focused on. It's what's going to get people up in the morning and want to work on this business. And your vision, I mean, like, that's where you're going. That's your 5-year plan. Like, it should be exciting. It should be inspiring. It should make people want to be excited about what you're building. And you should find people who are excited about that and want to join your organization to help it succeed because of that. And one of the big mistakes that I think a lot of first-time founders make, and myself included, and this is one of those mistakes that you really only make once, it's not prioritizing that and not focusing on that and taking that seriously. And I think at the early stages, we did not do that.
So what did you find? Your initial hires were like just in it for the money, or what was the issue you're running into?
Yeah, there was some people that definitely didn't work out. I mean, the worst part of any job is having to let people go. I mean, it's horrible, right? It's because it's life. I mean, it's devastating for them at the end of the day, and it's you don't want to bring that hardship on anyone, but a lot of times it's what's right for both of you, because if that individual can't succeed at your organization, realistically, you as their boss, you're holding them back, right?
True, yeah, that's a good point.
You've got to let them go find the place and where they can succeed. And at the end of the day, if you're going to let someone go, you can always help them to find that place, because at the end of the day, like that's the perspective you got to come from, right? Is caring about that person and wanting them to succeed in their own role, wherever that may be.
Yeah, it's just not at your organization, but somewhere else still. Yeah. Okay, so that would be your, or do you have more details on that? I don't want to cut you off.
No. I was just going to say, like, I mean, that's probably the key thing. And I think that for us, really, at the early stages, it was something that we didn't take seriously enough. And when you don't have values and when you don't have a mission or a vision that you're really focused on adamantly, what ends up happening is you can hire people who maybe aren't necessarily a good fit for your organization, because if you don't know what the values are that you're looking for in the people that you hire, if you don't know what your mission is and why people are there to do it, if you're not giving people, one, a very clear job description and what they're supposed to do every day when they're coming into work, and on top of that, a very clear definition of success in terms of letting people know what they can actually do to be successful in their day-to-day job. What's the metric that they're pushing forward and what's the goal? If you don't have those things in place, it's very hard for anybody to succeed in an environment like that.
Yeah.
And so for us, I think that our biggest mistake was not taking that seriously enough. And I think that it really, there was a day where it really kind of came to a pin. And there was people that were upset. I mean, it was just like a very, because we didn't have those things in place, it created an environment where nobody could really succeed. And it really, I think one of the days that I look back on that was really, really challenging was just sitting there and realizing that we have very limited capital in the bank. We don't necessarily have a product that's working yet. And we have a culture which isn't successful. And I remember just sitting there and seeing all these things line up, and you're kind of like, what do I do?
Yeah. No, there's definitely those pivotal points in any business that you have where like either what worked before isn't working, or maybe you've been putting all of this effort into one thing and then you realize this isn't working, and that's where some people, I think, you're either meant to be like an entrepreneur or you're not, because you probably looked at that as like, okay, let me figure this thing out, versus being like, okay, I give up.
Well, that was the biggest thing, right? And I think I remember coming back, and it was just such a challenging time because nothing seemed to be going right. Like we were at the time, we were working on the wrong product. The business was heading in the wrong direction, and we weren't building a space where people could be successful in. And I remember coming home from this convention where everything just kind of came to a T, and everyone was really nervous on the team about where the direction of the company was going, and what was going to happen from here, because we were really starting to become tight for cash. Venture money is great, but it runs quick.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and just thinking like we're fucked, it's over.
Man, that's wild.
It was one of those moments. And at the end of the day, I think that what really helped us turn it around was, number one, establishing those values and working with the team to figure out what are the things that we care about as an organization. Like, what are our core values that we believe in? And for us today, it's really clearly outlined. It's radical candor, which is the whole idea that you're going to care about other people deeply while simultaneously challenging them to do their best work.
Sure.
It's creativity, like seeking people who can come up with different, unique solutions to problems. We look for people who really value learning in there as well, and really have a lot of humility and understand that it's not about getting to the solution that makes me feel good. It's about getting to whatever the right solution is.
Sure, yeah.
Our other values, like collaboration. We want to build a team where everybody can work together and everybody can help each other be successful. And then positivity. Like we want to just build a great place to work where people can be successful. And I think it was outlining those core cultural values and then also implementing a very clear mission and vision that people could get excited about and get behind. Were the key stages for that. And then, outside of that, once we had those values in place, we transitioned the team, and we found that, some people weren't going to be successful at the organization anymore, and other people were going to be really successful.
Yeah.
So it was, a tough time, but at the end of the day, where we ended up landing was, we took the product in a totally different direction, because we had gotten data from our users that the direction that we were going in initially was not the right path. And on top of that, we also, on top of changing that product direction, we really revamped a lot of the ways that we interact together, our processes, the way that we run the business internally, to make sure that we're building an environment and a culture where everybody can succeed and everybody can actually really love coming into work.
Yeah.
You're going to work 30% of your life, so why be miserable while you're doing it?
Yeah,
right?
It's really interesting that you mentioned the whole culture thing, because I realized as you're saying that's why I had such a miserable experience at my job. I mean, working for a utility company, it's not like they have goals. Like they're just, the goal is keep the lights on, and when the lights go off, get them back on, So that was very interesting you said that. I never had like measurable. I had no measurement of success. I had no idea. Am I good at this job? Am I horrible? I don't know. And so and then it would be like you're going to work every day and you're just like, what is the point of any of this? It's kind of like the thought process. So that's really interesting.
Well, and just to add to that super quick, like it's really the switch of going from this mentality that you are. I think a lot of people go into leadership positions thinking that, and this is something that I certainly did too, thinking that you need to know all the answers if you're the boss, and you need to be the one to solve everything for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And realistically, I think it comes at a principled baseline switch in the organization where you turn a switch in your head, and instead of coming at leadership from this perspective of like, hey, I'm the boss, like I know everything, like I'm supposed to lead it. It's really, how can I help you? And how can I
that's a really good point.
Successful?
Yeah, rather than that having the ego, or I got the biggest office, I got the highest pay or whatever, and then acting like you know everything versus like saying I don't know any of this, and then relying on the team. Yeah,
and that's okay. You're human, right? Like everybody's human at the end of the day. Like you can't be expected to know anything, and especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, like these are mistakes that a lot of times most companies make these mistakes. At the early days, and it's hard and it stinks, but it's oftentimes just a lesson that you kind of have to learn. And once you learn it, I mean, you never, it's a mistake that you never make again.
Yeah.
But realistically, like at the end of the day, being able to create a culture where leadership in it is able to serve and support their people and help them be successful, like for any leader in an organization, like that's what's going to make people want to work for you at the end of the day.
Definitely. So circling back quick to college, did you graduate?
I did graduate.
Did. Okay.
Just barely.
Yeah, because I know we were talking, and you said things the ball started rolling while you were in college, and you're probably looking at these two things here. You're like, okay, I got this business that needs my time, and I got this degree that's supposed to teach me how to run business, and the business is already going. So what was that like as far as balancing school and the business, and then also the graduating piece? Because I think a lot of people in college, like rather than partying or hanging out, like they want to do what you were saying and like start a business with their friends. So like, what is that whole dynamic like?
Yeah, totally. So I'll touch on graduation first and what that looked like. So originally the plan was that I remember going to my parents in December of my senior year, and I had one semester left, and I was like, everything was picking up. We were starting to get investment from outside capital coming into the business, and I felt at that time an obligation to help support the business and help make that as successful as possible. So at that time, essentially what ended up happening was I remember telling my mom and dad, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm not going back to school this semester." That didn't sit very well with them.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I was really torn though, because I found that I wasn't necessarily getting the value that I wanted to get out of school, because I was learning so much more working on this company. And it was like you were learning 5 years of experience every single year that you were working on this business, because there were just so many problems and things that you don't know what you don't know, right? Whenever you start a business, and there's so many little things that you have to learn that's going to make that business be successful. So I remember in my senior year, I just felt like I was learning way more working on this business than going out and going to college. And I kind of pushed my parents like, hey, let's go do this. And they did that did not sit well with them. And what ended up happening was we worked out a compromise where I would work out of one of our investors' offices in Saratoga, and I would commute from there up to Syracuse University twice a week to go to class.
To do your classes, yeah.
Yeah, and it was about a 2.5 hour commute one way, 2.5 hours back. And I'd literally drive up there, take the class for 2 hours, and then drive back. And everything else was online, which was great. But it was certainly challenging in order to do that. But I mean, at the end of the day, I got the degree. So that's
right. Yeah, and it's good. I mean, you were right at the end. You might as well finish it up. But that's always interesting. I've got a couple of friends that I've talked to who have like been in that situation where they've got this business or something that starts taking off, and they're like, okay, this whole college thing isn't making so much sense anymore, So as far as so 2 questions for you. Number one, I know you said, and we'll circle back to the other one about doing a business in college. That's number 2. But aside from, and this is probably a tough question, but aside from the fact that that college allowed you this time freedom, aside from that, do you recommend college?
Well, I have to answer that honestly.
Sure.
I think that college is great for I think it depends. And I think that it's really good if you're looking to have an opportunity to have time. Like I think that college is going to give you a tremendous experience, at least for the first 2 years. And that was my experience with it. I found that the classes that I took, it really opened my perspective coming from, I mean, Boston Spa, right? Like a super small
area,
like a small town, right? You're often isolated in terms of how you think and what your perspective on the world is. And by no means do I, know that much, but, point being, it's like, it really helps to open your mind, and it really helps to expand the way that you think. And for me, I remember there was this one class, it was like Max 132, and it was this class about politics, and it forced you to review different current events from both sides of the equation. So you'd read articles that came from the right, articles from the left, and you essentially had to, but they were not easy articles. It wasn't like just a news report. It was really like challenging, in-depth articles that really forced you to think. And what I found was just going through this, and you had to write an essay on it. I remember my first essay that I handed it, I was like, oh, this is going to be great, right? And I got a C on it, and I'm like, what?
That's funny.
Yeah, but I remember it pushed, a class like that, it pushed me to do way more than I thought was possible.
Okay, yeah.
And it forced me to expand the way that I thought about the world. And having that space to myself where I wasn't in my parents' house anymore, and I had the opportunity to work on what I wanted to do, it gave me the room that I needed to grow and mature. And I think that college gave me, for me, it was all about learning, and it still is today. I just love to learn. I love running this business because of that reason. And for me, I found that I had tremendous value. I received tremendous value from college for the first 2 years that I attended it.
Yeah.
After that, I found that what I was working on outside of college was teaching me more than what I necessarily was gaining from it. That being said, I think that college is great if you are going to be starting, or if you're going to be working in a legal field or as a doctor. Or,
right, yeah, doing something more technical, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's specific skills that it can teach you, which is going to be great. I think that for business, it's very difficult to teach entrepreneurship because a tremendous amount of it is in the actual act of doing it.
Right. It actually reminds, what just came to mind for me is like this analogy of like learning entrepreneurship at school is like trying to learn how to ride a bike out of a book, like reading, how do I ride a bike? Oh, okay. Rather than just getting on the damn bike and like falling down a couple times.
Yeah. And that's what you have to do. I'll tell you, like starting your first business, it's really trial by fire, and you're going to make a ton of mistakes. And like, that's okay. Like, you're human, right? Like everybody makes mistakes. If you didn't make mistakes, there's something wrong with you. Like, that's like the whole thing at the end of the day. And it's okay. Like, everybody makes mistakes the first time they start up a business.
Yeah. And well, I'm actually glad that you said that, because so many people are just like shitting on college these days. I mean, myself, I got a 2-year a technical degree in electrical construction that cost me at like $11,000, and I had $10,000 from my grandfather that went towards it, so I didn't leave with debt. Did you leave with debt, or?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you left with some student loans, but it is good to hear that side of it, because so many people are like, oh, college is a horrible idea. And like, if you're looking at like if you're not going to go to college and instead you're going to hang out and drink Mountain Dew and like play nothing against video games, but if you're going to be lazy, like, yeah, go to college, but like, it's not necessary. But I am glad that like you're taking that side of it, where it's like, yeah, you did get some value out of it, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody, right? Yeah. You have to, in your own point of view, understand what you're looking for. And I think that it's so important to understand and have clarity in what you want to do.
Sure.
And if it's going out and starting a business, well, you can do that while you're in college, and you might as well and see where it goes, right? Because by the time you reach your senior year, maybe you're in a position where you can drop out and you can do it. And I do think that going into I do think that it can open your horizons, and I do think that it can help you think more broadly about different things. I just think that you have to be really heavy on the value that you want to get out of it. Like, if you're going to business school, you have to ask yourself, like, do I want to go and work at one of the big consulting companies, or do I want to be an accountant, or do I want to be trading stocks on Wall Street? And if that's what you want to do, go for it. Like, college can really help you be successful. But at the end of the day, if you have different goals and maybe you want to start a business, maybe there's value that college can add for you. Maybe there isn't. I think that it's different for everybody, and I don't think that there's any right or wrong way to go about it. I think that everybody just has to figure out what work. I think you just have to figure out what's going to work best for you
Sure.
at the end of the day.
All right, so one thing, I know we talked about like your worst day with this business, which was the whole culture thing. What was the best day? Or like maybe was it a big client or a big influencer? Or when was it when you were like, okay, we're onto something here?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I think it was when we had to put up a wait list for new clients that were coming onto our platform because we really just couldn't handle the demand. I think it was after we had gone through that transition and really hammered down on how important our culture was and our mission, our vision, and really what we wanted to create here. And we started to build a place that people love to work at. I really think that after that and having to go through that transition, which was not easy in any way, seeing the results of that and seeing the product get turned around, put in a better direction, seeing a tremendous demand from our clients and people who wanted to come and actually work on this, and seeing just the team and how they were able to succeed and make this happen. It was just such an awesome moment, like when we realized that we literally have so much demand.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have for sure.
That we gotta do that. So I'd say that was probably one of my best days. That and I'd say also probably getting in the Techstars.
What is Techstars?
So Techstars, it's a really, I'm in the Harder right now. It's a accelerator program. And what happens is companies that are it's essentially like startup school.
Okay.
So they'll bring in 10 companies every single year, and they will invest money into those companies and take an equity chunk of them. And they will work with you intensively for 3 months to help you succeed and bring a product to market. And it was like our biggest goal for like the longest time to get in the Techstars.
Oh, and you did?
We
Very
did,
cool.
yes.
Wow,
and it's such an exciting program. It's very competitive to get into. It has a lower acceptance rate than Harvard. And it was really amazing because we got to work along so many world-class businesses and mentors who helped us change our perspective on how the business runs and the different ways that we can get value out of it. So I remember like the day that we got accepted into Techstars, it was probably one of the biggest highs ever. That being said, one thing I'll say about investment is that it's not winning. Like taking on outside capital from an investor or taking on people investing in your business, all it is, it's a resource.
Sure.
It isn't a measure of your success. It isn't a measure of you actually creating something that brings value to the world.
It's basically just fuel, right?
It's fuel, and it's high octane fuel at that. And you can't run a business off of it is the key thing. What you need is the diesel fuel, and the diesel fuel is the money and the revenue that you're generating from your customers.
Okay.
That's what you run the business off of. The high octane fuel that helps you get from point A to point B faster.
Okay.
So the key thing is, I think it's just so important not to view it as winning, because you see all these articles that go on all these different websites like, oh, this startup just raised $10 million.
Almost like that's the end goal is like, oh, I've raised this much money.
Yeah.
Not so much the end goal being, like you said, getting to profitability and sustainable numbers.
And I mean, like, look at companies like, Theranos, or other like major startups out there that have raised. Unfortunately, WeWork.
WeWork. I think Uber.
One.
A lot of these. I don't know. Is Uber still one that's not? Spotify. I think all of them are like massively unprofitable, aren't they?
Yeah. And I mean, specifically like with companies like WeWork or companies with like Theranos or others. I mean, at the end of the day, you can raise billions of dollars in outside capital, but that does not mean by any measure that you're going to be successful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a good point that you said too. Yeah.
So I think a lot of times in the startup world, it's just celebrated that you raised all this capital and that's great. And really, it's a milestone. And it's something that helps you get from point A to point B faster. It's very difficult to raise. It's not like you walk in and they're going to cut you a check, after a day. It's very, very hard to raise outside capital. And it is a slog of a process. But really, at the end of the day, it's fuel for you. And it's something that helps your business move faster. But it's not to be confused with winning, just like press isn't winning or any of these things. Realistically, what winning is, it's building a product that your customers love that helps them succeed in whatever their day-to-day work is.
Yeah.
Like that is success. It's not raising capital.
Yeah, and I feel like those things fall under the category of the clout, which is what I was trying to say, which is like, oh, you know, I'm featured in this news publication, or I got on Forbes magazine, or look at what I've got. We raised all this money. So it's kind of like the showboaty stuff versus like the actual, like, okay, you know, this is really benefiting customers' lives, you know?
It's easy to get caught up in that. Like many people do. It's very easy to ride that and think that because you're getting featured in a ton of publications or because you've raised all this capital that you're a successful business. But the truth is that it's finding product market fit, which is the point of which you've created a product which your customers love and you have more customers than you can handle, is very challenging to do. Most companies that fail, 90% of startups fail.
Wow.
And
I didn't know it was that high. Oh my gosh.
It is.
90%?
In the first 2 years, yeah.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
It's very hard to make it. And even if you've raised capital, it doesn't mean that you're going to be.
That's not the golden ticket?
No guarantee at all.
Okay.
Most companies fail because they fail to find product market fit. They fail to build a product which addresses a need that their customer has.
Yeah.
And unless you've actually managed to do that, realistically, you're not winning. And I think it's just so important to not confuse the two, because if you're building a business which is generating revenue and growing very quickly, like that, and you're building a great culture which helps people succeed, that's winning.
Yeah.
If you're raising a ton of capital, getting featured in a ton of publications, and living the quote unquote startup CEO life or whatever you want, I don't know what you want to call it, but if that's what your definition of success is, it's probably going to be very challenging for you. Yeah.
So let's see. I have one more question, then I have something at the end I want to ask. But the last question, business related.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they're both business related. But what is it like? So what does your team look like now? How many employees do you have? And then like where do you see this going in 5 years? Would be my follow up here.
Yeah, totally. So we're a team of 8 people right now.
Okay. So you and the 2 founders, you're 3 founders, right?
2 other founders. So
other
myself
founders.
being included.
Okay, yeah.
So it's myself, 2 other founders, and then we have 6 other people that work with us. And it's a rock star team. Like I love them to death. They're awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. Do you guys have an office, or where do you work out of?
Oh, we built the company remote, actually.
Oh, so it's all remote.
Yeah,
okay.
we utilized tools like Slack and Skype before Slack came along to actually build it. And we've managed to actually create the company completely online. Now that we've raised this round recently, we're now utilizing those resources to open our first office and hire a lot of people. So in the next year, we're going to be a team of probably 20 to 24 people.
Oh wow!
So we're gonna double in size pretty quickly, and then after that, we're really looking to ramp up to probably a team of about 100 people.
Wow, that's fantastic. And then as far as like 5-year goals, like where do you think you'll be in 5 years with this?
Yeah, totally. So our immediate mission right now, and our absolute focus over the next, I'll speak to the next 2 years and then the 5 years after that.
Sure.
Our next 2 years and our mission is to create the most compelling and streamlined destination for activating sponsorships in gaming communities. So what that really means is that we want to build the best platform out there for helping creators in any type of gaming community, whether it's Twitch or Mixer or YouTube Live or whatever it may be, to be successful and find these sponsorship opportunities. And we really just want to create the best product out there and help those people to succeed. And then our 5-year vision beyond that is we really want to build the first influencer exchange. So we want to take the best parts of platforms like Google AdWords or Facebook ads, the simplicity of that buying experience where you can come in and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. These are my goals and this is my budget. We want to take that media buying experience and allow you, instead of buying an ad on Facebook or an ad on Google, to actually enable you to buy a celebrity or influencer endorsement. So somebody actually talking about your product and vocalizing that to their audience. We want to take that experience and merge that with celebrities and influencers. And we want to take that to every single platform out there in the world. So
so beyond just Twitch?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So
cool.
Facebook, YouTube,
Instagram,
Snapchat.
probably, right?
Oh, yeah. Instagram, TikTok. We want to support creators no matter where they're at and help them to be successful. And outside of that, there's other verticals that we can go into too. So sports, fashion, travel, for example, are all different categories that we're looking at expanding into. And then on top of that, internationally as well.
Wow.
We want to go into Europe and Asia. And really our vision is to turn this into a really massive venture that can help support millions of creators all around the world and help them be successful.
And that's phenomenal. I like how
live
it's
out their
such
dreams.
a large vision too. So it's like way beyond just like Twitch and what you're doing now. Yeah.
Well, the key thing is having a mission and a vision, because the mission is going to give your team and you as well absolute focus on what's important over the next 2 years. And if you have that mission, it's really going to enable you to just be dead set on that. Because if you're a startup company, you have super limited resources, right? And if you waste those resources, or if you put them into two things at once, for example, like, oh, I got like this crazy idea, like, what if our company focused on both gaming influencers and travel influencers at the
So
same
if you
time?
went after two at once,
Yeah,
and you're
going after
split
two at once.
50-50 at that
well,
point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're going to do two things subpar if you do it like that. And that's why, and at the end of the day, you're going to build a product that addresses nobody.
Yeah.
So the key thing behind a mission is you really want to have a clear definition of what success is going to mean over the next 2 years that you can go after and tackle. And if you hit that, it's going to allow your team to absolutely focus on that and nail that over the next 2 years. And then if you completely succeeded at that, that's when you start to grow and expand. And that's when you can start to tackle that greater vision of what it is that you really want to create long-term and deliver that value.
Yeah, I think that's such a valuable lesson right there too, because I know even myself, like probably every 6 months, I have to like take a step back, look at my business, and basically trim the fat. Where I'm like doing things that are like that are just not helping me in terms of like, I'll look at this, I'm like, what is this doing for me? This isn't bringing in extra money. It's not growing my audience. So I think entrepreneurs in particular have that shiny object syndrome where you're like, that looks cool. Oh, that looks cool. Oh, so does that. And you're just trying to do all these different things at once, when in reality it's like you got to focus in on just the one. Yeah.
Well, think about it. Like, creating a business is an extremely creative endeavor, because you're coming up with something out of nothing, right? You're creating a business that maybe never existed before, and working on an idea that's never came into the world. So it's very interesting. Entrepreneurs on the Big Five psychology scale typically score very high in open-mindedness, which is a domain of creativity. So a lot of times what happens is you have these super creative, enthusiastic, passionate people who become entrepreneurs, and they're super passionate about whatever they're working on, and then they want to go shiny object syndrome and try and tackle everything at once. And the challenge is that that's awesome. Like, embrace that. The fact that you have that passion and want to go out and create all those things, use that, but harness it into a greater vision.
Yeah.
If you try and do all those things at once, you'll lack focus, and you'll end up trying to do two things at once, and you're going to split your time 50-50 between them. You're better, and you'll do both of them subpar with half effort.
Yeah.
Versus if you put all of your time into one thing and made that extremely successful, it may be smaller initially than maybe the market that you could be addressing, but at least you're building something that works, right?
Right, yeah. And putting all your effort into one thing, yeah.
Yeah. And if you can make that one thing that works, then, well, growth is really just a matter of repeating that, right? It's a matter of taking that one thing that's worked there and replicating that across multiple domains. And at that point, that's when you can really execute on that. But it's so important to make sure that you're focused, because if you're not, you're going to end up doing two things at once, and you'll find that you really won't get anywhere.
Yeah, I've learned that lesson too. So, okay,
at least in our experience, we found that.
Yeah, maybe somebody else, you're able to do 5 things at once and do them well, but I know I certainly can't.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to ask you quick, then we'll wrap up here. I know a lot of young people are probably going to end up watching this video. So let's say you're talking to somebody who's 17 or 18 years old, teenager, and they're saying, what advice do you have for me? They're interested in entrepreneurship if they're watching this video. So like, what would be your best piece of advice you'd have for somebody who's kind of in that situation, 18 years old, and they're like, maybe they have some ideas. What would you say to them about that?
Go do it.
Just go do it.
I mean, that is like surprising. That's one of the biggest challenges that I've found when I've spoken with so many different entrepreneurs, is just starting it and getting it off the ground.
Yeah.
Like that is the biggest thing. I know for me, I'm a very shiny object syndrome kind of person, where I get super passionate about something and I really want to chase that down and go after that. But I'll find I'll start something and then I'll stop it.
I used to do the same thing.
Yeah.
All the time, get something that's like, oh, this is so cool. Yeah. And I used to feel like you had it's almost like your analogy there with the diesel and the high octane fuel. Yeah. But I felt like I had this high octane fuel, which was like the initial excitement of oh, this is new, this is cool. And then that would wear off and I would just be fall flat because I'd be like, oh, I've got
Exactly.
nothing is keeping me going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You get super passionate about one idea, and then it's hard to actually go forth with that and make that happen.
It always takes a lot more than
yeah.
you think it's going to actually do it. Yeah.
You want to know one really secret, like kind of like life hack? If you tell everybody that you're doing something, it forces you to actually stick with it.
That's funny. That's the same thing I did when I launched my channel, dude. That's actually funny you said that because when I started this YouTube channel and I had no success, I literally like put it all over my personal Facebook. I messaged all of my friends, my family members, because I was like, there's no way I'm not going to succeed if I make an ass of myself and start recording videos. So that's really good, man. Like I like that it's kind of like again putting your feet to the fire, where you're like, okay, yeah, now I have no choice but to do this and stick with it. Yeah,
you got to force yourself.
it's like
to do
being
it.
public about your dieting goals, or like, hey, telling everybody on social media you're going to quit smoking, because then it's like, all right, am I going to embarrass myself and not do this?
Exactly.
So
yeah.
I definitely like that life hack. That's a good one.
Yeah, if you tell everybody that you're doing something, like you said, like it forces you to actually
forces
go
you to
out
do
and
it.
do it because you're then held accountable for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really like the key challenge that I think holds a lot of people back is just not necessarily just going out and doing it. Like you'll have that shower idea moment, right? Where it's like, oh, you're in the shower and you're thinking, and it's like, oh, this idea sounds really good. And then, maybe two or 3 days later, you're still holding on to it and you're like, this is a really good idea. The key thing is just going out and starting it.
Sure.
And going out and just trying it as much as you can, because realistically you don't have anything to lose. All you have to go is up, right?
Right.
You know, even if you fail, like what did you lose really?
And you learned.
You learned,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So it's free education at that, you know?
And that's the most valuable thing, because you can take those lessons back and you can apply them to whatever business you're starting in the future. And it's going to set you like years apart from other people who are maybe not doing that or not executing. So I would say, one, definitely start. 2, keep with it, hold yourself accountable as much as you can, and really like make sure that you are aggressive about that, and that you're, whether it's like bringing on co-founders or people who can hold you accountable to actually follow through with what your passion is, ensuring that you have that in place. And then the last thing I'd say is write a business plan.
Okay.
And this is something that a lot of people don't do, where you don't go through the exercise of writing it. And for whatever reason, like I know that there's been a ton of entrepreneurs I've had the opportunity and privilege of working with. And one of the key things that I find a lot of times is that people don't write a business plan. And a lot of people think it's antiquated, right? But in my experience, what I found with it is that it's a really unique and powerful tool which helps you think through where your business is going. Now, you don't have to create like some 50-page, really in-depth business plan, and it's a living document. You're going to change it. If there's one thing that I can guarantee, it's like you're going to change whatever your idea is from the start, and it's going to evolve as you learn more information, as it should. But the key thing is, writing a business plan really forces you to think through what the key elements are that you need to focus on for your business. It helps you think through what the key impediments and challenges are that you might have. And it forces you to think about how this business will monetize and actually make revenue. And going into it with a very clear plan is what's going to help you be successful. And I would just say, like, on top of that, just really identifying and being hard on yourself about what is the problem that you're solving. This is one of the key things that people with shiny object syndrome often struggle with. This is something that I struggle with so much myself, is we just go. And for me, like, starting something wasn't the hard part. It was executing on it. That was the really challenging part of it, was sticking with it over time. But what ended up happening was, and this was something that we just kind of did. We just started going. Like, we just started creating and building and making this platform off of what we thought was right and what we thought the solution was. And the thing about it is that super creative people, to their credit, and entrepreneurs are often super passionate and have really incredible ideas. And they're able to go out and essentially they just want to go and build it and create it. But the key thing and what you're doing when you're building a business is you're solving a problem for somebody. So if you don't understand what that problem is, how do you know that you're building the right solution? And this is something that so many people can struggle with. That's something that I've struggled with, like, really deeply myself, was just wanting to go out and create and start building. But what I found is that if you can take a week or two to just talk to your users, talk to your customers, understand what is the problem that they actually have, it's going to save you years of time than just going out and trying to push it through the hard way.
Yeah.
If you can talk to your customers and understand what is the actual problem that you have here that you're trying to solve, that's what's going to help you create the best experience out there and build the best business. And just like a quick tangent on that, like we really had this interesting experience at PowerSpike where when we first started the company, we just executed hard and we just started building, and we built what we thought was the right solution. And we had this really interesting experience where we had created this platform that was it was like a marketplace, and it gave brands tools which made it easier to manage your influencer program. So we'd give you like a CRM or analytics or discovery tools that made it easier for you to actually run an influencer marketing campaign. And the really interesting lesson that we found was that so many brands and clients wanted to work with these creators on platforms like Twitch, but they didn't want to use the tools and they didn't want to have to actually manage the influencer program themselves. So we were in this situation where brands were paying us money to go out and run these campaigns for them, but they weren't using any of the things that we had
all the time you spent building these tools, they didn't even want those.
They didn't even want them.
Whereas if you had initially reached out to them and spent a week talking to them about what are you looking for, you could have avoided putting all that time into making these tools. Years.
Wow. If we had just talked to our customers for a week or two and understood what were the key challenges that you're facing and what is the problem that you have, and if we understood that the problem wasn't that they needed an easier way to run these campaigns, that the problem was it just takes too much damn time. If we had understood that, then I mean, entrepreneurs are creative people, right? You figure out a solution to it. Like that's what you do. You're creative. So you can. There's a million ways to solve that problem once you understand what the problem is. But if you don't have that understanding, then who are you building for?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's going to wrap this up here, guys. AJ, thanks so much for coming on. I mean, thanks so much good value here. Even I'm sitting here like I got to definitely take a lot of this to heart too that you've said. So PowerSpike.tv, is that the website?
PowerSpike.tv.
PowerSpike.tv. I'll link it up in the description. And then do you have like, I don't know, social media, Instagram, anything like that?
Yeah, Twitter's the place, man.
Twitter?
So at PS_desecration.
Sure, I'll link up all that down in the description below. But yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you taking the trip. And I hope to see you guys in the next video.